This class is Essence of Education for Life, and already you all have practically taught it for me because you have picked out a lot of the things that are the essence of education for life. I was getting my master's degree in education back in, I don't want to remember when that was, but 70s, I guess, and I took a class on a counseling class and studied Abraham Maslow. And I don't know how many of you know about Abraham Maslow, but he's one of the very few psychologists who had made it his field of study was normal and what I would call supernormal people. Instead of studying abnormal psychology, he studied people who were either big achievers or who just had joy and tried to figure out what brought that. And you probably have heard of Maslow's hierarchy, a lot of you. But one of the things he said, I remember I wrote my paper for him, about him for this class, and one of the things he said was that it's a shame that the schools, because they have to be religion-free, that they have thrown out the teaching of values along with the teaching of religion, but there are many values that people could all agree upon. And I just thought at the time, this was before Education for Life and before all that came into my life, but I just thought, I know that's true. I just know that's true, but I'm not sure how you do it or what that would look like. And it took many, many, many years for me to learn what that looked like. I know when the book Education for Life came out, even though it is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, and it does come from ancient yogic truths. And later on in some of the classes, I'll draw some parallels to some of the Sanskrit terms and etc. That it's for anyone, for everyone. It's not about a particular religion or even any religion, because atheists can agree and do agree that responsibility is important, that kindness is important, that generosity is important. I know one of the things that so thrilled me about my book, and I'll identify it for the video audience, Calm and Compassionate Children, is that I received a sterling, resounding review in a magazine called Mandala, a Tibetan Buddhist journal. I also received a recommended Buy This Book review from Tikkun, which is a Jewish journal. And my book is now on the Center for Progressive Christianity website and being recommended by Christians. And also I know it's been the book that was studied by a group of parents at least one Baptist church. And so this is really thrilling to me, and I bring it up because what we're striving to do here is not create more Ananda schools, but to take timeless principles and translate them into practical action for today's world and today's children. And what it looks like here is not exactly what it looks like in Seattle or Palo Alto, or what it's going to look like in India, or what it looks like in Assisi, or what it might look like in Africa or wherever. A lot of the principles are going to stay the same. However, the outward manifestation is going to have to take into account the needs of the people, the culture they're coming from, and all of those things. But the core principles stay the same. And so what are those core principles? Well, one of them you all have already brought up. And well, first of all, let's talk about the law of motivation. And what is the law of motivation? It's that everybody wants to be happy and to avoid pain. That simple. And if you look, there are millions of ways that manifests. Some people do it by having a goal of becoming millionaires. Some people do it by having their whole goal is to have a big happy family. Some people do it by acquiring things. Some people do it by going back to the land and doing organic gardening. Some people think they can achieve it by travel. Some people, unfortunately, try to achieve it through drugs and alcohol. That's a method of avoiding pain and trying to be happy. But no matter how it outwardly, that's what, at the core, motivates everybody. And so, if that's what motivates everybody, then we can use that in how we motivate children and how we teach, which is to show them what actions bring them happiness and what actions do not bring them happiness. And it's not didactic. You all know didactic, right? It's not that we preach, do not be selfish. I mean, we may preach that, but that's not how they're going to learn it. They're going to learn it by experiencing selfishness and then being pointed out to them later in a very gentle way that didn't bring happiness. And then it's going to be by giving them opportunities to open their hearts and to be unselfish, and then showing them, wow, look how happy that made you. For example, Sandy Goodwin, when she taught intermediate, she had her kids every year be secret pals with the kindergarten for Valentine's Day. And so they would leave a little Valentine on the kindergartners' desks, and they would make chocolate chip cookies or some sort of cookies. I have a photo of that in one of my slideshows that you'll see sometime. And they actually bag them up and package them really pretty and write a note. And while the kids are recessing, for a 10-year-old, it's so much fun to do something secretive and to try to sneak in there while the kids aren't there, and they always succeed, and leave these secret packages. And the neat thing is very seldom have the 4- and 5-year-olds ever figured out where they come from. They really don't know. They guess everything. And it's great because the older kids, have to keep it a secret and don't let on. Of course, we can see that they are letting on. But and then later on, it's a discussion of, was that fun? Why was that fun? And then when things go wrong and aren't fun, well, why aren't they fun? And when things go wrong on the playground and everybody comes in upset, well, what happened? Why do you think that wasn't any fun? When kids exclude other kids, well, look at what happened to the energy. Everybody's mad at each other. Some people are pouting. So does it really work to exclude people? And so what we're talking about is experiential learning and not didactic. One of the things that I'm really, really happy that more and more the importance of teaching, it's called all different things like EQ, emotional quotient. Let's teach emotional intelligence to kids. Let's teach calming down and yoga to kids. All these things are being espoused by different groups, and even in the public schools. I know that there's yoga in the public schools. Great. But so often what I find is these new innovative curricula, yes, the concepts might be really terrific, but when you actually look at what the curricula is, it's exactly like what was used to teach us when we were all in school. Here's the lesson, here's what you tell them, and here's the coloring handout they do at the end of it. I know recently I went to some of you are from Seattle. I don't want to say anything that in case any of you were on the committee that created all this, but I went to the Seeds of Compassion event last spring where the Dalai Lama spoke in Seattle, and some of the curriculum, at least that they had on the website that they were recommending for kids, was just the same. I don't know if any of you grew up going to Sunday school or catechism or whatever, but it was just the same old thing. It was just, except it was teaching compassion, but it was just teach them this, have them learn this, rather than giving them experiences. For example, bringing a dog into the classroom, bring a buddy day where every kid gets to bring, well, the kids can bring their stuffies anytime anyway, but on bring a buddy day, which we did, we haven't done one in a while, have we, Helen? But we used to do them maybe a couple of times a year, and the kids would bring a stuffy in, and in this classroom they would have a tea party, have pictures, just so cute, the stuffies sitting at the table with their tea. And another picture that I really treasure is these 2nd and 3rd grade boys who brought they all had Beanie Babies. And they used to play, what's that game? Foursquare. Foursquare out here. We had a Foursquare painted court, and they played it constantly. And when they went out on Bring a Buddy Day for recess, these boys took their little buddies, and do you all know how Foursquare goes? It's a block of 4 squares, and you progress by bouncing the ball, and if you don't get it in the court, you're out. And if you do, you go to the next level, next level, next level. they took the little buddies and put them right in the center of where the intersection of the box is. And when they'd move to the next one, the buddies would all move too. And then when they got out, the buddy'd go with them. And they just, what does that do for a second and third grade boy? It's okay to have fantasy. It's okay to pretend. It's okay to show tenderness. It's okay to have heart. It gives them the opportunities to actually experience those things. I know that recently, as I mentioned, the Center for Progressive Christianity, because of going to this conference in Seattle, there was a Presbyterian minister there whom I met, and she was actually called by the center and asked if she would help write a Sunday school curriculum, because what the progressive Christianity people believe is, besides they believe in Christ and they believe in the teachings of Christ, but they also believe that other paths, I'm quoting it as nearly as I can remember from their website, that other paths to also have as much validity for the people who practice them as ours does to us. And it's very inclusive and, just the kind of thing that they would love, Education for Life schools, right? And the president of the organization feels that one of the most important things they can do, there are 400 churches who are affiliated with it, everything from Catholic to Lutheran to United Church of Christ. And in fact, when I spoke at the Librarians Conference, Church and Synagogue Librarians Conference last July, one person rushed up from New York afterwards and said, "Our church is a member, we can't wait for you to do this curriculum," like she was going to get it next spring. I don't know, sure. But anyway, he felt the most important thing they could do to support all these churches is to provide curriculum for teaching kids that promoted the principles that they espouse and that weren't the traditional, sin and redemption and you do it because you're saved. And so this Presbyterian minister said, "No, I can't, I'm too busy, I can't write it, I'm a mom. But I know somebody you should talk to, the author of Calm and Compassionate Children." And so when he called me, I said, "Well, let's meet and talk." And after I met him, I said, "I know somebody you should talk to, Lorna Knox, author of I Came from Joy, Spiritual Affirmations and Activities for Children." And I gave him both of our books. And his daughter read my book, and he read Lorna's book, and he called me up and he said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for, and I have not seen anything like it." And he has searched all the Christian, he's especially gone to publishers in Canada who actually produce what he says is, in his mind, the best Christian Sunday school curriculum. But he said that none of it helped the children live it. They were just talking about it. You know what happens when you talk to children about telling the truth endlessly, or you talk to children, this is a big one, to talk to children about being kind to each other. Doesn't this happen when one kid, one brother hits the other brother and then the other brother's crying, and isn't it our first response is, "Why did you do that?" Well, of course, if they knew why they did it, they would be teaching child psychology, because I'm hungry, Mom, because the teacher slighted me at school today, Mom, because you have this other child in the family, and I'm jealous because I'm living in a world that's media saturated and I'm overstimulated. You expect them to explain to you why they did it? No. And then the second thing we say, "How would you feel if somebody did that to you?" They already feel upset. They can't possibly get out of themselves to look at somebody else's point of view. So now, not only are they feeling bad because they've done something you're mad about, they also have to feel bad because they don't feel the way you want them to feel about it. Apologize. It's all this big thing about go apologize. Like that makes it all right once they apologize. But how many of you have seen 75% of the time, they don't feel it, they don't mean it when they're apologizing. It's just another way to suppress your real feelings and act this way. Yes, we do want you to learn to control your feelings and behave, but talking about it just doesn't change behavior. It's having kids have experiences and then reflecting with them about those experiences and how it feels. As it says in Education for Life, and I can't possibly put it any better. An important point to be realized: when helping children to achieve fresh insight into the problems they encounter in daily life is that the intellectual understanding of a problem is not only insufficient, but often is not helpful at all. What is important is that they find themselves moving happily in a new direction, and not that they themselves understand all the reasons for the direction. This is profound. This is not what other curricula are doing. If you don't believe me, go look at it. I mean, bring them in. I'd love to find somebody else who is, because we could collaborate. But that's not what you find out there, because there's just not this awareness that, and what is this next core principle that brings us to this next core principle? That it's all about working on an energetic level. It's about, oh dear, the Vimala handwriting person, I know she's about to, that's how that G should look. Something like that. And to me, this is one of the core, most important differences between our model of education and all the other great models that are out there. Parents come to me and they say, what's the difference between you and Waldorf? And, you know, basically, I mean, I'm having to sell our school, right? So I want to say why it's better, but I feel badly about that because I don't want to put down Waldorf. You know why? It's spiritual. You know, it's based on the fact that children are spiritual beings. It has much in common with us. And I think we need all the spiritual schools we can get. So I don't like to criticize them. But on the other hand, we are different, you know. And one thing we all have in common is they do believe children go through stages, and they believe the first 6 years physical, the next 6 is feeling. But then we differ. They say the next 6 are intellect. And we say the next 6 are will. And then intellect. Another way we differ is that they have a set curriculum. That's a huge difference. This is the curriculum for this age. No matter who the kids are, no matter what their needs are, you teach fairies when they're in kindergarten. Maybe. I think that might be right. A certain age you teach Norse mythology. This is the curriculum. Whereas education for life is a little bit more flexible, a lot more flexible than that. You know, what does this class need? What does this teacher bring to the table? What gifts does this teacher have? You know, people say, well, of course you do yoga in all your classes, right? No. If the teacher is not a person who's enthusiastic about yoga and loves yoga, is she going to impart that to the children? No. Maybe she does some other sort of discipline or physical exercise or calming activity. I mean, yes, we all do calming activities, and we all do body activities. But there's so much more fluidity in that. Now, how did I get to this? Oh, I was going to say, we share so much with so many good systems because, and here's another, I'm throwing them at you fast, I'm going to come back and talk about each one a little bit more. Here's another core principle, and that is that truth is universally rooted. We do not have a market on truth here, obviously. And we believe that so strongly that we, as you know, have adopted some other whole system for part of our teacher training, which is the conscious discipline approach, because it's just so excellent and such a great thing that you can learn and depend on until such time as you have learned to always be in your own center and speak to the child's center. It gives you a system to fall back on when, I don't know about all of you, but even though I'm striving to be centered all the time, the kids I can get off real easily. How many of you get frustrated with your kids or upset or tired or whatever? I see some nods and some smiles, and then what do you, and then you're not in your center, and when you are, inspiration will come so often, especially if you're always striving to see things from the energetic point of view. What is the energy here? What's the energy behind this action? It often shows you what you can do next. But we're not always in that spot, and so that's why we use conscious discipline. But truth is universally rooted. We can find truths in common from Education for Life and many other systems, and certainly other teachers. There are Education for Life teachers everywhere who've never heard of Education for Life, because they teach from the heart. because they instinctively speak to energy. Maybe they don't have the vocabulary to know they're doing that, because they work with leaders in the class, because they teach from a holistic point of view. And that, of course, is another core concept, is that we teach the whole child. And specifically, there are two different ways to look at that. If you look at it from the tools of maturity, we teach the whole child, which means the physical self, the feeling self, the will, and the intellect, those four. Another way of looking at teaching for the whole child, I hope I have it here, maybe in my other notebook. Here it is we teach them, we want them to be complete human beings, and that can be described as physically complete with balance, fitness, and energy, mentally complete with focus, clarity, and intuition, and spiritually complete. This brings, so many of you are already thinking these thoughts, you've already given them to us. Spiritually complete with direction in their lives, serenity, inspiration, and higher guidance. The exact opposite thing is happening in public education. Instead of being holistic, I'm going to use some $40 words here. It's reductionist. And what does that mean? It means that everything is broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller units, and then we teach the child that. Okay, so the child needs to learn to, let's see, history of the U.S. Okay, so by the time you break it down into what are the essential core facts of the history of the U.S., anything about inspiration of leaders like George Washington or Martin Luther King kind of gets lost in teaching to the test. Teaching, everything is reduced to what are the smallest pieces of this information, and if we teach that and build on that, and there's some truth to that. You learn to add before you learn to subtract. You learn to multiply before you learn to divide. It's not without any truth. But there's a whole different way of looking at life, which is not intellectual, which is holistic, which is if you get the energy right, the details take care of themselves. If you get and sometimes details are part of the energy, like getting ready for this class, having nice notebooks for you, having food for you, that's all, this is part of making it an energy that you feel uplifted when you come into. But still, it's the energy that's the most important, not the detail of the lesson plan. It's the energy that you set in the classroom. It's the energy with which you relate to the children. And most of all, it's how do you deal with their energy and how do you work with their energy that forms the core of education for life. Let me give you an example. One day it was Sandy's lunch off, and I was talking with her in the classroom, and a little boy came in and he said, "Sandy, so-and-so did such and such to somebody on the playground." He was quite indignant about it. And she said, "Uh-huh. And what is our rule now about tattling?" He was all in his emotions, and he goes, "Oh yeah, well, if you're telling it to keep somebody safe, it's being helpful. If you're telling it to get somebody in trouble, it's tattling." She goes, "Uh-huh, so which is this?" And he goes, he turns around, walks out the door. He didn't say another word. Now, this is an education for life teacher, teaching you to go within, to feel what is your own experience of it, and working with energy. That's pretty subtle, isn't it? But kids can get that subtlety. They really can get that subtlety. I remember one time when I was teaching at Ananda Village, some of the junior high students, now the one who said this is an adult with two kids of her own, and I know they were talking at recess and they said something about someone puking, and somebody said, "Oh, that's a word we're not allowed to say in here," because I guess there'd been trouble with the energy going down with graphic descriptions of things, and I don't know. But anyway, she said, that's a word we're not, it wasn't my classroom, so I don't know. But she said, "That's a word we're not allowed to say in here." And the other kid said, "Well, yeah, But in this instance, we're talking about an actual physical event, and I think it's okay. I don't think that's a case where we can't do it. And that's subtle, isn't it? That's talking about energy. I know that when, I keep saying Sandy, but that's probably because my office was in the same building with her classroom for the last 4 or 5 years. But I remember that one day she came in, what's the right word? Concerned, because someone had hit another child very hard on the playground deliberately. And that doesn't happen here very often. I mean, we can probably count on one hand the number of times that has happened. And of course, obviously, this was a child we'd had some problems with already and we're working with. But anyway, and so coming from public school setting, this was one of her early years here, she said, well, don't we have to send him home? Because isn't there a policy of when there's violence, you send them home? I mean, that's not allowed. You've got to draw the line somewhere. And I'm not saying that public schools shouldn't draw the line there, but I'm just saying that in this school, I said, well, is that really any more hurtful than what was said the other day in Circle when somebody said such and such to another child? I mean, this was another boy the same age, the same size. It didn't really, he wasn't wounded. He was upset, but not wounded. Maybe we should work with this. And we can't just draw a line in the sand and say, if this action happens, then that. It's always what's the energy behind the action. I know one time I had a parent in a classroom, and she said, after this class, she came up to me and she said, now I understand. My child wanted to quit ballet. And we had been they spent summers in Assisi, and she said, we came back late into the school year, and she had missed the first 2 classes, and I felt like she was just scared to walk back in and it already be going on, and she would be out of the not part of the program, and she was awkward. And so I said, no, you can't quit. You have to go to at least 2 more classes before you can quit. And she just loved it and spent the whole year in ballet. The next year they came back from Assisi, and the child wanted to quit ballet. Same sort of energy. I don't want to go. Why do I have to go? Just if you were just looking at it externally, it looked real similar. But just feeling the energy, questioning her, she realized she was now not being homeschooled. She was in school. She had her social needs much more met. She had a lot more homework. She was a lot more involved in other things. And really and truly, she had outgrown ballet. It was different, so she let her quit ballet. So again, it's tuning into the energy behind things, working on an energetic level. One time the kids came in from a play. Now you'd think that the children's theaters would do plays that are appropriate for children, wouldn't you? But what our society thinks is appropriate to children and what we in Education for Life educators think appropriate are sometimes 2 different things. Sometimes they veer into, we think, too much darkness, too much negativity, too much violence. The sexual innuendo isn't as bothersome because the little kids don't understand it anyway, but why is it even in there? We don't understand it. But anyway, so we're very cautious when they give us the age levels for groups. We never fudge on that, and usually we err on the side of not letting the young kids go. But one time, do you remember what that play was, Sandy, that your class came back from?
Something called Pirates?
Yeah. Was it Peter Pan?
No, it was the woman, or there's a girl that's a pirate in
Molly.
Can't remember the name of it off.
Anyway, this is 4th, 5th, 6th graders that came. Sonali remembers because her daughter was in the class. And they came back from this play, and they came in at lunchtime, and usually they come in, they love theater. Kids love theater. And these were musicals, they love that. And they came in, and I remember the first boy that came in, I said, well, how was the play? He goes, you wouldn't have liked it, Usha. What's that mean? Oh, what's that mean, I wonder? And then some other kids came through, and said, it was okay, it was pretty good. And then a much more forthright girl came in, and I said, what'd you think of the play? She said, ew, I feel like I need a shower. I said, oh, and then Sandy walked in, and she went. I said, what was wrong with it, Sandy? She said, I don't remember what your words were, but it was too violent. It was dark. It didn't have any uplifted, and violence is okay if there's a message and an uplifted ending so that there's something to hope for and live for. And so I said to the kids, well, what can we do to feel better? Because I had been teaching in a class called Brain Gain. about the brain and about, how to stay healthy and how to calm down and how to breathe and how to, do exercises with your, what's it called? This part of your leg. To stretch it out, to relax. No, not the calf. Well, it is the calf, but the back part. Anyway, hamstrings. Thank you. Keep those stretched out. Helps you relax and all these things. And so, okay, well, how can we feel better? And somebody said, well, we could drink water. I said, yeah, we could. They named 2 or 3 things, and I said, well, how about let's sing a song? And they go, okay. And so I launched out into some song that we sing, and we all sang it, and it really uplifted the energy, didn't it, Sandy? That's how you teach kids what we're talking about here, is in the moment, when life brings you the curriculum, you have to be pretty conscious to do that, don't you? You have to be, and so that brings us to the last, well, probably not the last, I'm probably always going to have 2 or 3 more, but core concept is the teacher is, I've got a complex now. That the most important thing in the classroom is the teacher, and the teacher's becoming centered in herself so that she knows how to respond to the curriculum that life brings. I'm thinking of one year at the Ananda Village School when it seemed like the curriculum for the whole year was death. We had a child whose father was dying of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, that year. We had a deer that was shot that decided to come up and lie right outside the 3rd grade classroom and window and die. And Priya's nodding, she remembers that year. And the school dog died that year, who had been, some of the junior high and high school kids had that dog with them in 1st and 2nd grade and were quite attached. And so what do you do with that? Do you just go on with, okay, it's time to do Greek mythology today? Or do you say, okay, this is what life is bringing, and I trust that life is bringing us for a reason. It's here. We have to rise to meet it. We have to say, okay, what's the challenge? It was challenging for the teachers. That was challenging. Some kids had a real hard time with that, handling it. What's the challenge? How do we meet it? And it draws on our inner resources. And that is such a gift, because every teacher grows. Every good teacher grows. But if you're a good education for life teacher, it's to infinity before you're done, I think, because it's all about expansion, 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 expansion. If the goal of education for life is maturity, and maturity is defined as the ability, help me, Karen,
to respond appropriately
to realities other than one's own, then that doesn't just mean so-and-so in the classroom and so-and-so sitting next to you in the classroom. It also means when you go to the store, you respond to the rude clerk. It means you respond to other countries. It means responding, it goes on and on to all creatures on earth, and kids love that idea. They feel so attuned to nature and loving the plants and the animals, and that's a great place for us to start, giving them experiences of expansion, as I mentioned, about the stuffies. We have a policy here of people can, we want to know about it, but people can bring their pets and their puppies and their animals, because nothing changes the energy in the classroom like that. I know when the kids in the intermediate class were having a hard time and sniping each other, and Hannah, our school dog, you can see her in the pictures over there, she passed away a year ago. When she'd come be in the class for a day, it was like you'd added honey to the pot. The whole classroom would just become sweeter. Of course, she was a calm dog. It has to be the right pet, But kids, learning to be calm enough to hold a parakeet on their finger. They learn a lot about their own energy level, because with some kids, the parakeet would always fly. And with other kids, they would want to stay there. And why was that? And how could we change our energy so the parakeet would want to stay there? I have another lovely photograph of Helen's son and his best friend, who Helen's family got 2 little rat terriers, and they were puppies. And Luca, her son, had already left our school and was attending the Magnet School for Arts and Communication nearby. And they came over after school, and you must have had the puppies here at school that day. And they sat out on the back lawn, and I couldn't get over it. These were 14-year-old boys in full throttle of puberty and hormones and all that you go through. And at that age, and wanting to be cool and wanting to be accepted and having to be pretty tough, right? And they sat there on the lawn for 45 minutes in the same positions, they never moved, cuddling the puppies, just cuddling them and playing with them and letting them run around and then cuddling them and cuddling. And I thought, what an opportunity for boys that age to show tenderness. And this is experiential. That's what they need. It's not about telling them to be tender toward young and vulnerable. It's giving them opportunities to do that and helping them do that. It's all about experience. And then the best part of it was school got out, and the kindergartners got out, and one of Helen's most rowdy little boys was just magnetized right to those older boys. And still, and like, because who could not have their heart open? I mean, we know this is biologically designed. That when you see a face with the eyes proportion bigger to the head, we automatically think baby, and it's a biological response to protect it, right? But where does that come from? Where does that reflect a higher reality about selfless love? Or is it all just a biological imperative? I mean, there are only two possibilities here. Either this world is nothing but physical, and all those ideals we have about love and gratitude and joy are just figments of our biological brain. They're only chemical, and when we die, they're gone. Or this is a spiritual universe full of divine love, full of divine light, full of inner peace, full of joy. And we are physical manifestations of energy, and we're all capable of experiencing those finer feelings. We're capable of, as teachers and parents, of creating the situations where children can experience them, and they are divine reality. It's one or the other, and the physicists are fighting over it, and the philosophers are fighting over it. It's the big, thing of our times. The big, the quantum physicists, some of them say, well, there is something else, and they call it, ground of being, field of being. No, what is the word of it? What do they call it? I have to look it up in my notes, but something like that. And it's that. I mean, they know now that what is the body? What are the molecules? It's all, if the superstring theory is right, it's all vibration. What's making it vibrate there? Ground of being, field. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it's basically there's an idea that keeps it doing that, or an energy, or what is it? Is it your soul? What is it? There's something that makes your molecules vibrate like that, and you look like that and love art, and make hers vibrate like that, and make her love nature and turtles and PE, And is that all just from her brain? Is that just coming from her genes and her childhood experience, or is there some reality that we physically manifest that's beyond? And of course, in Education for Life, we believe there's energy behind all physical manifestations. And the more we work on that level, the more transformative and joyful our classrooms can become. And the more we work on the heart level, the more we, as Rachel Kessler, who is she's actually phenomenal. She writes books and has done a lot with spiritual education for the teenage puberty level, and gotten a lot of it into public schools. And she does it she doesn't use words like spiritual. It's like, who am I? What am I here for? And those sorts of things. And one of the things she said, I just loved at a conference recently, she said, from a child's point of view, their feeling, their thought, their unconscious reality is, if you hold my heart, then I'll allow you to engage my brain. Don't you love that? If you hold my heart, I will allow you to engage my brain. Science is catching up with this idea now. Now we know that there are more nerves going out from the heart than there are from the brain. That the heartbeat, when it's coherent, affects the brain, not just the other way around. We thought it all started here and affected all the body systems, But now they're showing, and they also that the energy field, the measurable energy field of the heart is actually, in many people, stronger and larger than the energy field the brain puts out. It's fascinating. Are we going to wait till we can prove all these things about the heart to start educating the heart? I hope not. Even medicine is already operating on the philosophical basis that there's something to energy. I mean, Western medicine, Mayo Clinic, Harvard Medical University, they all acknowledge that acupuncture works. They won't acknowledge why it works, but you know why. It has to do with energy flowing through the body, and when you do these needle things, it affects the way the energy is flowing through the body. They know that music affects healing. What is music but energy and vibration? These things are all shown to be true, and they're working in medicine. Medicine's already open to them. Education it's just pitiful, really, because it's only happening in little pockets of educators around the world. And there are others who are trying their very best to do this as well, and who are succeeding. But with Education for Life, we have a whole system, and it's not like we don't want to codify it and confine it to a system. It's not about that. It's about constant growth and expansion, right? But this model and this system allows us to work on a level with our kids so far beyond teaching them. I mean, of course they learn to read and write and do math and all those things. Why? Because the brain's designed to learn. It's designed to learn. And when we meet all their other needs, and then we teach them the academics, they just... And we don't have to repeat things over and over and over. God, well, you look at public school curriculum, look at some of the textbooks. Because I was an English major, I know more about those textbooks. And looking at the literature textbooks for kids and reading textbooks, oh my gosh, 4th grade they're introduced to the concepts of plot, character, setting. 5th grade, plot, character, setting, and point of view. 6th grade, plot, character, setting, point of view, and tone. 7th grade, it's this endless repetition. And why is there so much repetition? Because so many kids aren't able to get it the first time, because no one's attending to all their other needs. Nobody's getting them ready to learn before they learn. Nobody's addressing all the other things besides the intellect that need to be addressed before they can learn, or as they learn, I should say. It's like this. So let me see if I covered truth is universally rooted, law of motivation, everyone desires happiness, Education for Life teaches through experience, not dogma. The concept of expansion, maturity is expanding. And that's another thing you can always look for to say, okay, is the energy in my classroom going the right way today? Look at it, are kids getting a little more expansive, or did they get a little more contractive? Was it a little more about either me or just us, our class, or the first grade versus, or is it a little more relaxation into we can accept other realities when they come in? We work from our own center as much as we can to the child's center. And just remembering that when you don't know what to do and you're exasperated and you're thinking, I've tried everything, nothing's worked. Okay, right now maybe I can't solve this, but if I'm in my own center and I speak to the child center. When you think about the child center, often it just comes to you what this misbehavior, what this difficulty they're having is coming from. And then you address what it's coming from, not just the outer manifestation of it. And behind the physical reality is an astral or energetic reality. And the more we can work on that reality, on that level, the better. So now, and one more thing is because we had put this on the topics I sent you out. Did everybody get the email list of topics for each class? And one of them said, is it child-centered or is it curriculum-centered? Well, Education for Life, it's both. It's child-centered because you start with where the child is and take them to their next step. And that's all you can do. You can't take a child who is selfish and hitting baby brother because they don't want to share their toy and bring them to, share your toys with everybody at your birthday party. No, that's not the next step for that child. It's always about the next step for each child. So it's child-centered, whether, of course in math, I mean, all schools are child-centered that way, because all schools now, I mean, everybody knows you don't teach kids something beyond their ability to learn it. You have to teach them the next step academically. But it's also, it's not like free school. It's not like Summerhill. It's not like Rousseau's Noble Savage. It's not that, oh, you leave a kid alone and they'll ask for everything they want to learn, they need to learn in their life. Well, are you going to throw away centuries and centuries of human wisdom, whether it's the human wisdom that comes from Gandhi, from Christ, from Buddha, there are things that universally great people agree on and live their lives by. And so we do have certain things that we want the kids to learn, and we call them, a lot of the time, here, we call them living values. That's what they're called in the book, Education for Life. I think Nitai Duranja calls them skills for living a lot. And it's these qualities you're talking about, determination, right use of will, all of these. Gosh, does it seem like it's just endless and so big we could never do it? You only have to do the next step. All we have to do is the next step for each child or for the class as a whole.
Good morning again. Well, Usha talked a lot about some of the things I'm going to touch on too. But one of the things I want to do first is when we talk about teaching kids to self-regulate and know themselves and know what they need and things like that. One of the things that, being a yoga lover, that's one of the things I bring to my classroom, and it's one of the things that they tend to love too because I love it. And you'll find that whatever you love, your kids are going to love too because you carry the enthusiasm and the joy of it with them. So one of the things we do is the kids learn to tune into when they need to move because kids need to move at regular intervals. So one of the things they can do is anybody at any time can call a yoga break. And we also learn a little bit of self-control and understanding within that because they realize that, okay, if I'm in mid-sentence and we're in mid-concept or explanation, obviously you can't call a yoga break and freeze everything and everybody runs out and does yoga for 2 minutes. But you can call a yoga break and at the next opportunity we'll go ahead and do that. So, and we only take 2 minutes. It requires a little self-control. And what I want to do is invite everybody to take a yoga break right now and stretch just a little bit. And if you have a favorite pose, you are welcome to just do it. And if you would like to follow something that I'm going to do, you're welcome to do that too. So if you go ahead and stand up, and we're going to take the hands to the heart. And inhale and interlace the fingers. Exhale and stretch them forward. Inhale, stretching the arms up. Exhale, letting the hands float down behind, clasping the hands palms together, inhaling and opening the chest. And if you'd like, you can even exhale and bend over, or you can go back to the beginning, hands at the heart, stretching out the back of the legs, and inhaling back up. And we'll do it again at least one more time. You can do it your own breath pace, or you can follow me if you like. Inhale and interlace. Exhale, stretch forward. Inhale, up. Exhaling down. Inhaling and opening the heart. And exhaling back to prayer position or bending. And inhaling back up to center. And exhale over to hands back to the sides. And kids are encouraged to do their own yoga poses. Once we have a routine down, they know what ones they want, and they're welcome to do whatever they like. So if you have a favorite pose you want to do right now, you're welcome to do that. Or you can follow if you'd like. Find our calm and centeredness of tree pose. I have a student who, before his math time test, he'd go over on the floor and do child's pose, rock pose, because it was a centering and calming pose, and he could do his time test better that way. And if you're ready, you can move over to the other side. And inhaling up. Exhaling down. How are we doing? Are we feeling a little bit refreshed? Is that good? Okay. All right. You can have a seat if you're ready. Okay. So again, that's part of self-regulation. And when I think of role of a teacher, there's so many things that come to mind. And when we were brainstorming about the class, we kind of grouped it into some categories. And so I'll try to use those as a guide. But the first thing that really comes to mind is the role of a teacher is to create an environment where that child can blossom, where that child can be themselves. And so in order to be yourself and to blossom, what kind of conditions do you need? Anybody? You think? Safety. You got to be safe. What other things might you need?
Physical comfort.
Physical comfort, yes. Safety. Acceptance, exactly, yes. Anything else? Kindness. Calmness, yes, exactly. You have to be able to feel what's going on inside. So a lot of what happens, I think, right off the bat is, the teacher is creating an environment, your energy goes out, your aura goes out around those kids, and they have to know that you are there. The boundaries need to be clear. And Swami in the book, Education for Life, he talks about not spoiling children. Okay, and he talks about not giving in to every, all the whims and all those kinds of things. But you have to have that environment that they know what is okay and what's not okay. And so boundaries are real clear, and you encourage the kind of heart qualities that allow the child's natural gifts to come out. And the best thing to do in order to create that is to model. Gandhi said, be the peace you want to see in the world. Sometimes there are times when that's been my mantra, be the change I want to see in my classroom. Okay, if something's happening, I have to often look at myself. It's like, okay, what's going on with me that this is happening here? And is there something that I can do to help facilitate that process? And just modeling that. So that's one of the things that's super important. And also I feel like one of the things that I try to focus on is through your modeling, through what you teach in the classroom, through the activities that you do, you try to inspire. But then you have to respond, and you have to really tune in and listen and see what they're getting, where they're at, to find out where that next step is for them. So I'm going to attempt to tell a joke here because I thought it was apropos. And so this little boy comes out of the sanctuary, and he's standing in the foyer staring at these plaques on the wall, and the pastor comes out, and the little boy says, "Pastor, what are all these names on these plaques?" And the pastor says, "Well, those are the names of all the men and women who've died in the service." And the little boy's eyes get really big, and he says, "The 8:30 or the 10:45?" So, and it just goes to show, I've had some experiences, and I was trying to remember the specifics of them in my classroom where that's happened. You think you're being really clear and you're explaining something, but all of a sudden, you come around, you find out that you're not being clear. It's being construed as a whole different way. And you'll find that there are certain students in your classroom that are barometers for that. And I always remember Usha saying, I know who was her barometer all the time, and I know who mine was too. And this is because there are students that often, you're going through things and they have these looks on their face, and you're not sure what that means. But you can look at that one student, and if she's got a funny look on her face, you know something's wrong. And you haven't been clear, and then you need to check in with that. Because it's so easy to have in your mind, especially when you're new and you're trying to figure out how it all works. Think, oh, okay, well, I'm going to talk about this, and this is what I'm going to do. But then, you need to do that. It's like Yogananda's energization exercises. You tense with will, and then you relax and feel. So, you put out your energy with will, but then you have to relax and feel what's coming from the kids. You feel, okay, what's going on her face? Does she have a quizzical look? Does she feel confident? And then you check in with them, okay? So it's part of monitoring what's happening. Are they getting it? Are they responding? And what levels are they all at? All the teachers here can attest to the fact that having multi-ages in the classroom, you have to know that, okay, what is appropriate for this student to be getting it at is different for this student. And knowing that that's okay, and having it be okay for them too, and giving them the freedom to know that, okay, you're in 3rd grade and this is the first time you've heard that. This 6th grader's heard it several times already, and so I don't expect you to get it the way they do. And so having that confidence to know that wherever they are at personally is fine. And it isn't even related to grade. It's related to where you are and your level of understanding. I'm going to check my notes here real quick. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was spiritual practices. And I know, coming from a public school background, that was a totally foreign idea for me in the classroom, because of course that was a big no-no. You don't do that kind of thing. And so, and it was something that I was not comfortable sharing in a public forum. It's like, well, that's always been something that had been personal for me and not something that I shared or taught. And so in my mind I thought, okay, well, that must mean that we're gonna pray every day, and we're gonna om every day, and we're gonna chant every day, and we're going to do all these things. We're gonna talk about saints all the time, and all those things are great, and I love doing those things, and if that's what you're comfortable with, that's great. What I found for myself is it was a lot easier for me to come in through the back door with things, to look at what are the other things that can be spiritual experiences for people. Well, for me, it's being in nature, okay? Being out in nature, bringing my dog into the classroom and having the sweetness come from having her around. Art, art is such a spiritual experience. Music is a spiritual experience. All those different things, you can experience the spiritual through lots of different avenues, and it really depends on the students. There are students, I've had years where the students didn't really want all that much to do with anything that really sounded overtly spiritual. Okay, and I remember Usha sharing one time that she had a year what all she could do was have them lie on the floor and listen to uplifting music. That was the extent of what those kids were open to. Otherwise, you're pushing them the square peg in the round hole or whatever, or you're trying to force something, and what does that create? Resistance. Okay, so it comes back to the same thing: finding where they are, what are they receptive and open to, and letting them receive that on whatever level is available. And I had just written down here, something we often do, and I've never had a class that hasn't been open to healing prayers, doing healing prayers for people, because again, it's about other people. Doing healing prayers, of course the arts, nature, and one of my favorite is just noticing things. And it's something that's just so powerful, and I'll never forget noticing the noticing that was happening. We were going to the library, and we were walking across this parking lot with a group, and one of the 6th grade boys, it was a large group that year, one of the 6th grade boys just stopped everybody. He goes, "Oh, stop you guys, look at those clouds." And all of a sudden, usually when they're walking to the library, they're just, jabber, 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 jabber. Everybody was just stood stock still, looked up, and they were exquisite clouds. They were the kind that have the gold lining all around the outline, and they were just fabulous. And there were a lot of older boys in that class, and everyone was just entranced and silent for a period of time watching those clouds. And that's something that I think has been encouraged throughout the years, all the way from, I don't think we had preschool when those boys started, but I know certainly with Helen, and I know certainly with Usha too, and Karen, and I know everybody has a tendency to do that. And it's something that when you start doing it, again, you're modeling it, the kids pick up on it, and they start noticing things too, and it helps bring them inside. And what more spiritual experience could you want other than going inside and finding your center and your peace in that way? So, and I'm interested to hear, what are some things that you think about that could be spiritual experiences for kids? maybe that we haven't mentioned, other than the arts or nature? Any others? Yes.
In our school, we actually are working with UNESCO on art mural. That is, this is a project that I believe it's in 2010, will end up in Egypt. And again, it's another theme is around bridging, where there are many communities, not just school communities, but all around the world that are going to be contributing to what we think will be the longest mural ever that will go in the Guinness Book of World Records. But it is, of course, the essence behind it is bridging peace right now in an international community where our governments haven't been very successful.
And yeah, joining your energy with others, creating that sense of oneness. I mean, there's spirituality right there, and creating beauty and putting out willpower can be spiritual. I mean, there's no little box that you put having a spiritual experience in. It can be anything done with the right attitude and with the right frame of mind. So that may not be as much of a revelation to you as it was to me in the beginning, but anyway, I just wanted to share that. Yes, Helen?
For us, it's music, just singing a chant that they don't even know the name of it, like Kopala. They don't really know all the meanings of it. And another thing is to write or say something nice to each other.
Yes.
That's very uplifting.
Acts of kindness, exactly. A lot of times in February, different classes express that in different ways. We have, Kindness Week or Acts of Kindness, or like Usha shared, the Secret Pals. A lot of times our class would want to do things like that, or sometimes the older kids just doing things for someone else. Sometimes at the end of the year, they would want to do something for the younger kids, like, put on a harvest fair, or put on last year, what did we do? A geometry fair. They wanted to do a geometry fair. This was the sweetest thing. The kids in the older class, they work a long time to earn their class party. And when they earned their class party, they could have done anything they wanted to with their afternoon. And they said, oh, we should have a geometry party. And they decided that it would be more fun to put on a geometry fair for the younger kids than to just have the party for themselves. And so that's when to me that's a spiritual experience. I don't know. It can come in lots of different guises, so to speak.
I've had kids when maybe they're figuring out something mathematically and they'll suddenly see a pattern, and that will be a big spiritual experience for them. One day we were talking about palindromes, and we were looking at words and numbers, and it's the same both ways, forward and backward, it doesn't matter. It's like, but you could just see the light start to shine from them as they kind of got this sense of wonder and order in the universe.
Yeah, and then also in the next thing kind of ties into that, and that is kind of framing and naming experiences. So kids know when they're having experiences, or just having them tune into it. So in an experience like that, when they've looked at this mathematical pattern and they're just fascinated with it, and then just thinking, oh wow, and how does that make you feel? And it's just kind of like a little, or how does that feel, or and that's even kind of verbal. You can do it in different things, or what is that? How does that make you want to move? Or how does that, what kind of picture would you like to draw with that? Or how would you like to express that feeling of beauty or connectedness that you feel? And so then, just helping frame that in a way that they can realize that that's happening, because, not that it always has to be conscious, wow, I'm having a great feeling, but, sometimes it's helpful to make them aware of that. So they can contrast to other times when maybe they're not. So as far as the pointing out and naming activities, like for example, I know with Trina, it's a great skill that I have picked up on, and she talks about just naming what she sees. So instead of evaluating, so for example, if a child's out there and he's got the ball on the tee and he hits the ball and he's, what do they want to do? They're going, did you see that? Did you see that? And instead of saying, wow, that was a great hit. Okay, you've put an evaluation on it. It's good. It's whatever. She'd say, wow, yeah. You stood there, you held the bat really tall, you swung it, and you hit that ball, and it went all the way over there. Okay, so you've just named, you've shown them, you've mirrored back to them, I was paying attention and I saw that thing you did. I'm not labeling it good, bad, indifferent. I'm showing you that I've seen it, I've given you my attention, and it doesn't have to be about me giving you approval for something. And it really, I think, helps kids to get what they need from you, which is your attention, without getting your approval and your evaluation of everything that they do. Because we all know the kids, and probably those of you who do art are most familiar with this, is you're doing is this good? Do you like it? You know, is this okay? Is this, and maybe your kids don't do that, and that's wonderful, but I'll tell you what, there are always certain kids that want to do that. They want your stamp of approval. They want you to tell them when they're done, when they're complete, how it's been, and all those things. And that's not necessarily being the most centered, is it? Okay, you're being externally oriented. So just observing what kids are doing, mirroring back to them, or even when it's in a negative thing, if somebody's gotten frustrated, sometimes kids don't know. Have you ever had a situation where a kid's really frustrated and you say, wow, you're really angry. I'm not angry. It's like, oh, okay, we're not angry. So instead of maybe necessarily labeling that, which sometimes can be helpful, you say, wow, your body's stiff, your hands are in fists, and your face looks like this. And then all of a sudden you've just given them a mirror of what they're doing, and then all of a sudden I think there's something a little grounding about that. It's like, oh, I'm doing that? Wow, okay. And then they can put in a label on it if they want. Well, I must be angry, okay. And then maybe going from there and finding out what can be done about that. So framing experiences. And I remember one time, Usha, I love this, I had a student that walked in the classroom one morning, came in and said, Usha, Sandy, did you see that great spider web out there? It's really beautiful. And we said, well, no, show us. We went out, and it was way up, okay? And I remember Usha said, well, you must be happy because you were looking up. And when you tend to be happy, you look up like that. And I remember he was like, oh. And, I don't know if it made any big significant difference to him, but it was just a noticing. It's helping them understand something that's happening. And so and you can use things like that to help change energy. So if we know being upward or looking upward makes us happy, then maybe if we're not happy, maybe if we look upward, we bring our arms upward and do activities like that, we can raise our energy too. So it's all in teaching them what they can do for themselves, recognizing what's happening already, okay, by framing experiences. Holy cow. Let's see what else we have here. And some of the stuff I was going to talk about was things that you're going to get with Becky Bailey in the DVDs that we'll be watching each time. I guess we'll be watching segments of them. Yeah, she talks about things like that too, recognizing and helping them label when something is being helpful. For example, if you're sitting down, you're trying to get circles started, and maybe not everybody's cooperating. That's the word I'm looking for. Maybe everybody isn't quite cooperating, and you have somebody that does. They come down, or they finally do, and you say to them, wow, you came right over and you sat down so that we can get started. That was helpful. Okay? And again, you're just acknowledging what they did as being helpful. Well, they may just think I just came over and sat down, but there was some way that contributed to the group. And sometimes it's good for them to know, that this is something that's being helpful, something that's not. Are there any questions at all? I feel like I'm just going on and on. So, trying to fit it all in. Okay. Have you had any experiences where you can think of maybe students could have benefited from having a little feedback given to them in that situation, or done that and found it to be helpful?
There was an experience just recently out here where one kid was really upset. I don't remember what he was upset about, but there was something happening that he didn't like, and he couldn't figure out what to do. And I think it was Ellie, one of the girls, was up in the tree. And she was up there looking down at this and then giving him suggestions. Well, you could do this. You could take your toy. Oh, I think it was that other kids were playing where he wanted to play. Well, you could there's a bush over there that you could use too, or you could ask them to move, or you could go find some other toy to play with, or she was just spouting out all these different ideas. And he was in no mood to even listen, you know. He was just kind of seeing her as yet another obstacle in his way or something. And he finally just kind of stomped off, and I looked at this, and she was up there sort of like, oh, you know. And I looked up at her and I said, you were really coming up with all kinds of solutions. You were ready there to just give him all kinds of ideas. She said, yeah, I was. And I said, he just wasn't in the mood, was he? He just wasn't in the same place you were. She said, no, he wasn't. And then she was perfectly happy to go on. But it was just one of those where there wasn't any perfect conclusion. It was just labeling and helping her see what it was that was going on. And she was just perfectly happy to say, yeah, you know, I was right there, but oh well.
And that's a good skill too, to be helpful first, but to know when to say, I've done my best, and it's up to that person to decide to be happy or not.
Right.
And you know, and that was the other thing, you know, knowing that you can choose. You know, you can choose to be happy. And I know Karen had a great story about choosing to be happy. With I don't know, it's just the time that we were going to do that. It just came across that. Go ahead.
Some years ago, there was a girl who was in first grade, and she had a real difficult time periodically, like basically she'd have a big meltdown every single day, because she'd get upset about something that wasn't going her way, and she would have a big meltdown, and she would let it color a good part of the day. She had a really hard time coming out of it, and Helen was a great one for helping with this, about modeling it for me, and so I could help this girl with it, helping her gradually to see that she could choose to be happy or not, that this situation had occurred, and she was upset about it, and it was done now, and she could choose to have a good experience the rest of the day, or she could choose to be miserable. And I mean, we worked on this gradually, but day after day after day after day. But partway through the year, she started really kind of getting this and being able to make that choice. And the one thing that was just so sweet to me later was she came from home with this story that she was saying, oh, I was upset with my dad. He wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do, and I knew I could choose to be happy or I could choose to be upset and miserable. And I didn't want to be happy yet, so I went to my room and I stomped around in there, but pretty soon I thought, you know what, this isn't very much fun. So I decided I might as well be happy. And then she went and joined the family. And another really sweet thing was with this same girl, later on, her parents were telling me she was talking to her 4-year-old brother, and she's saying to him, well, Andrew, you know, this happened, and you can choose to be miserable about it, or you can choose to be happy.
Passing on her wisdom.
Finally, she got it.
Yeah, so, you know, and a lot of it is just like that, teaching kids how they can help themselves, what they can do for themselves, and how to tune into what's happening to begin with. Yeah, she can choose to be happy. You can choose to try to help people and then say, oh, well, okay. Or I can be enthusiastic about this, or I can drag my feet through it. And comparing, how does it feel when you do each thing? And, you know, that touches on what the last topic was. What Usha talked about already a little bit was providing the direct experiential things, the way kids learn. And yeah, you know, you can come up with some of these things. You can sort of manufacture a few things a little bit. Like I know in our Secret Pals, we also do it in the form, it's kind of like in the form of I think they call it Secret Santa or something, where, you know, everybody chooses somebody else in the classroom that's their secret person, and they give them, you know, secret gifts. And at that point, there's always there are always people who are really good, they're getting stuff every day, and then there are those that aren't. And they have to wait, and maybe they get something big at the end, or maybe not, And they look at those experiences, and sometimes we do that several different times, and they have different people, and then we talk about it sometimes. Wow, what was more enjoyable for you? Did you enjoy sneaking the gifts into somebody else's desk, or did you enjoy peeking in your desk every day to see what you got? Okay, and which was more fun for you? And they can compare those experiences. And there are always those who think giving and sneaking is more fun, and there are always those that are all about, what am I getting, And there's no judgment about it. It's just noticing how it feels and comparing the experiences and having them learn to do that. There's a great game that Nitai, that I learned from Nitai, and it's called Fortunately, Unfortunately, and it helps them with even-mindedness that way and looking at both things. And so the game goes around the room, and the first person starts a story and says, well, fortunately, we're going to go camping this weekend. So the next person in line has to say, unfortunately, it rained, or they decide something unfortunate that happened. The next person then comes up with something fortunate. But fortunately, we had rainproof tents. Unfortunately, the tents leaked. And and you can just go around and doing the activity, and it really, I think on some level, it's really interesting how it gets in there that, things are up and down, they go up, they go down, and you know what? In the grand scheme of things, it's all the same anyway. We're looking at the same ball of wax, just from a different angle, basically. And so, let's see. But a lot of them, like she said, you just have to grab things in the moment and find out how things are going. And there's a lot about allowing children to blossom and open on their own, but that doesn't mean you don't step back and intervene when you need to. Sometimes you can't let things play out because you see the energy going south in places. And I remember one year I had a rather large group. We went on an overnight field trip in the fall, and we had this event happen where the boys decided to play a practical joke on the girls, and they stole all their shoes, and I don't know what they did with them. Just stole their shoes, I think is what it was, and hid them or something, so they didn't have their shoes in the morning when they wanted to go out. And it was kind of cute, and it was kind of fun, and oh yeah, haha, that was funny. And then the girls decided to do something to get back at the boys. Okay? And it was all kind of in good fun for a little while. But then, when the next trip in the spring came along, they were plotting ahead of time, and I could hear them. They were plotting. It's like, oh, what are we going to do? We're really going to get them. And it started getting into this, we're going to get them mode, and things were really going south. And then there was all this fear on the girls' part. Oh, what are they going to do to us now? They're going to put snakes in our sleeping bags, or they're going to... I mean, they were just really it was not fun anymore, and it was getting to be something like that. So the girls were already planning their retaliation and how nasty it was going to be after the boys did whatever nasty thing they were going to do. And so I gathered the girls together, and I said, you know what? You know what would really shock them? You know what would really surprise them? They would never get this. Do something nice for them. Like leave them a present or something. And they were like, what? So, but, they were like, okay, they're kind of amenable to the idea. So they got some little glow sticks, or I don't know, something or other. And, one of the dads takes the boys out for the nature walk to look at the stars, and they're like, yeah, we know what's going on. Those girls are in there plotting something. So they were ready to tear back in there and find out what was going on. And when they found these toys and things, they were like, oh my gosh, this is really nice. This is really sweet. And so then, but the girls were still worried about what the boys were going to do, because the other shoe hadn't dropped yet. Okay, the boys hadn't done their thing, and they still thought they were going to do something nasty. Well, the boys ended up going out with the dad to the store and got a single rose for each girl and laid it on their pillow. And I'll tell you what, just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. We were up in a loft, and I was out taking them for the, quote, stargazing walk, and they knew it was happening. We came in, and they were dying to get up there and see, and they went in there, and not a word. They were dumbfounded. Their jaws dropped, and I still have a picture of all of them with the roses. They stood there looking at these roses just, and their hearts were just, just wide open. And that was the end of that. There was sweetness overflowed. There was no more, and the energy in that class was never better. I mean, it was always good to begin with, but they really were really bonded in sweetness at that point and in trust for each other. And so you got to take the situation and you decide when to let it play out, when to let them experience that feeling of, oh, what are they going to do to me? And I'm feeling all creepy and yucky and I don't like this, anymore. And then how they can turn that around, and how with your act first of being kind to somebody else, it may come back in kind, it may not, but there you are, with your heart open and seeing what happens there. So,
School. The first Education for Life school, perhaps. It was before the term Education for Life, but how this idea kind of came about, and then Usha's going to build on that. Back in 1917, in India, Yogananda was a young man. He was talking one day with his guru, Sri Yukteswar, and Yukteswar said to him something to the effect, I noticed that you're never involved with organizational work. And he was saying, well, which I can relate to this so well, because that was definitely my attitude. It's like, who would want to do that? You have all the headaches. You can never please everybody. You put out all kinds of energy and nothing good comes back from it. Who would want to do that? And Treasure, I'm sure, could relate to that. However, he said, where would you be today if other people had not put forth the effort to have some kind of a structure where you could learn all the things you needed to learn? And he really took that to heart. And he had always been interested in the idea of training for youths, where they could be trained in living skills and not just academic education, where there would be the ordinary intellectual training, but also knowledge of what leads to happiness and success in life. What are the things that lead to that? And so in 1917, he began a small school for boys. And it started out with 7 students. And by the following year, they had so much interest, and fortunately he had found someone who was willing to help support the work financially, and they moved to Ranchi, India in 1918 and established a large school that was for boys, and eventually they had other day schools for girls as well. The name of the school was Brahmacharya Vidyalaya, I think is how you pronounce it, which basically they translated it as the school for all-around human development. And many of the classes were conducted out of doors. There were all the usual academic subjects, including, I think, 4 or 5 languages, which was common for India because there are so many different languages. But there was an agricultural college course. The land where they had the school was 25 acres, and they also had a lot of fruit trees. So part of every student's instruction was having a little plot. 2 or 3 students would work together and have a plot where they would grow food. They also had industrial and commercial training, and they had a great variety, things like bookkeeping and typing, bookbinding, tailoring, spinning, nursing, first aid work, things like that. And as well, they taught them yoga, concentration, and meditation. The Yogoda exercises, which we know them as the energization exercises, for how you could recharge your body and your energy from the universal energy. And they also did daily practicing Kriya Yoga. So it was a very unusual school for the time, but the whole idea was to prepare students for life. So this was even though they didn't use the term Education for Life. one of the chief distinguishing features, though, was the individual attention to each student and the purposeful study made by the teachers of each student, looking for their particular gifts, their strengths, the potential that each one had. And that's a very important aspect for us of Education for Life as well, to look for a student's strengths, for their gifts, and to look for, as Sandy mentioned, what's the next step for this child and how can we help them achieve that. And so Usha now is going to take you through some of the more recent developments.